All right, guys, we're going to begin and read chapter 12 through 15 now. Choosing family. By the end of that long day, I hadn't found a job. Our money was gone, and we weren't any richer, except for the raincoat and bananas and bag of beads that Tea Shop Auntie had given us. Remember, Ruku had encouraged Vigi to give the money to the little girl whose little baby brother was laying behind her there in the street, and she had just grabbed the whole bag of her money and taken off with it. Still, I felt thankful we had at least that much. Most of all, thankful that you were following me without a fuss, with Cootie at your heels. Smart, independent Cootie, who'd scampered off to eat scraps out of every open, overflowing garbage can we'd seen. We wouldn't have to worry about feeding him. Arul and Muthu returned as we were trying to tie our raincoat to a steel rod that was poking out of the wall of the bridge to make a roof. Arms outstretched, you ran toward the boys. The raincoat flapped in the wind and started flying about the bridge. You squealed with excitement as I zigzagged after the raincoat, dodging the holes in the bridge. Cootie yipped and joined the chase. Cloth bird, Muthu yelled as he helped me catch it. Nice save, Arul clapped. But that's not big enough for a roof. What do you know, I huffed. We don't need you telling us how to build a shelter. Too bad, because I got a spare tarp for you. A nice big one. Now you tell me. After I almost twisted my ankle hopping all over the bridge. You could thank me, you know, he said. I could, I agreed. Arul grinned. I grinned back. Well, maybe you'll want to thank me after we have some dinner. We spread the raincoat on the ground and sat cross-legged in a circle around it. Arul set out their food, 4 crisp marukas wrapped in newspaper. My mouth watered seeing the beige spirals made of spicy lentil flour. I added the bananas that remained from the bunch that Tea Shop Auntie had given us. Arul pressed his palms together and said a prayer I'd never heard before. It sounded like Our Father, O-R-T, Naruam, something, something, all in English, not Tamil, like Amal's prayers. Then we split the food up evenly, almost. Arul insisted he wasn't very hungry. He gave me his fruit to save for you for the next morning. Ashamed that I was too selfish and hungry to be so noble, I downed my fair share. After dinner, Arul helped to build our shelter. We tied one edge of the new tarp to the rods poking out of the wall of the bridge, right alongside their tarp. You and Muthu helped us stretch the other end of our tarp from the wall to the ground and weighed down the bottom edge with stones to make a sloped roof. We hung our towel between the 2 sloped tarped roofs like a wall. I spread out our sheet and bunched up the raincoat for you to have as a pillow. Sleep well in your new home, Arul said. We crawled into our tent. I took out a book Paravathi teacher had given me and strained my eyes trying to read in the semi-darkness. But I could hardly make out the words. I put the book away and thought of how kind she had been to us. When we grow up, I want to be a teacher, I told you. This dream had flitted through my mind before. Voicing it for the first time made my dream feel more solid. But it also made me worry if, by running away, I'd pushed it farther out of my reach. You think I can be a teacher someday? Subu and Paravathi teacher moved to cities so their lives could be better, right? Like us? Story, you demanded. I sighed. I didn't want Arul hearing my story and thinking it was silly, so I started whispering as I had done the night before. Loud, he demanded. Palace, peacock. Okay. I raised my voice a little and saw Muthu's shadow as he crept next to the towel dividing our tents. When I was done, you demanded, again. I was about to protest when Muthu's voice floated through the thin barrier between us. Yes, Akka, please, one more time. His words made my throat squeeze up. And it was a few moments before I could speak again. He'd called me Akka, older sister. He'd made me family. Chapter 13, Work and Pray. That morning, after we'd combed our hair, I offered our comb to the boys. If you'd like, I said hesitantly, not wanting to offend them, you can use this. Muthu snickered. Next, you'll try to make us iron our clothes. Thanks, Arul stuck the comb in his tangled hair and yanked. Months since I did this. Months? Really? Muthu said. Aka would never have guessed that just by looking at your hair, boss. The comb snapped in two. Tak! You imitated the sound of the comb, breaking and clapped your hands. Tak, tak, tak. Sorry, Arul said, tugging at the piece left of his hair. It stuck at a jaunty angle, refusing to come out. Why are you sorry, boss? Muthu peeled with laughter. You just made two combs out of their one. Never mind, I said. Let me help. I pulled out the stubborn piece of comb, along with a chunk of Arul's hair. Ow! He yelped and rubbed his head, but continued apologizing. I feel bad. Is there anything I can do to make it up to you? There's something you can do, I said. You can promise to eat your share of our food every night. What do you care about how much I eat? Arul asked. I don't care. It's just that if you eat your fair share, then I won't have to feel guilty about doing it either. You made me feel like a greedy pig last night. Arul grinned. It's silly to skip meals, I said. How are you going to live a nice long life if you don't eat properly? What's the point of living longer? Well, what's the point of dying sooner? I don't mind going off to meet our Father who art in heaven as soon as I can. Our Father who art in heaven? Oh, you said that last night. Your father's dead? Yes, but I wasn't praying to my Father, he said. I was praying to God. He's called our Father. God's our mother too. Only if you're Hindu, he said. Hindus have a million names for God, but all are wrong because Hindus worship the wrong gods. I've never heard anyone say that there's a right name or a wrong name, let alone a right God or a wrong God, I said. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me because I don't pray. You really never pray? Arul looked horrified. Even the wrong gods are better than no God. My mother must have prayed 1,000,000 times for our Father to be better to us, but he only got worse. He always hit her, and then one night he beat us. So we ran away. I cast a glance at you, wondering if it would upset you to hear me talking about a paw. But you and Muthu were busy combing Kuti's scanty fur with one of the pieces of comb. What about you? My family died, Arul said. I'm so sorry, I told him. Don't worry, Christians go to heaven when they die. What do Christians do when they're alive? I said, sensing he didn't want to dwell on the subject of his family's death. I had a vague idea that being Christian had something to do with worshiping Yesu, a god who wore a crown of thorns. Arul started explaining all about Yesu and about doing what a book called the Bible says to do. Now, guys, Yesu is how they're pronouncing Jesus. Muthu joined us when Arul was telling me that Yesu said that if someone whacks you on one cheek, you should show them the other cheek. And if you do things Yesu says to do, Muthu added, you sprout wings when you get to heaven, so you can zoom like an airplane. You're a Christian too? I asked Muthu. I don't know, Muthu scratched his chin. You are, Arul said. You repeated those words I told you to, remember? Yes, Muthu said. But those are just words, and you told me to say them, boss, so I said them. But there's lots I don't really understand. Like what? Arul demanded. Like that showing the other cheek thing. And like, why didn't Yesu fight the bad guys? Muthu continued. He had 12 in his gang. Not a gang, Arul said. Followers. Gangs follow the boss, Muthu argued. So gangs are followers. Yesu had apostles, Arul corrected him. Teachers who spread his word. Stop talking nonsense, Muthu. You should know better. Okay, boss. I'll just turn around and show my other side. Muthu whipped about and wiggled his bottom at us. Arul looked at the sky and moaned about how he didn't want our souls to burn in hell until the end of eternity. If I hadn't been laughing so hard, I would have asked Arul how eternity could have an end. We're running late, Muthu glanced at an imaginary wristwatch. We need to get to the office, boss. Want to come with us? Arul asked as he gathered the sacks and sticks they'd been carrying the first day we met. Yes, thanks. We really need a job, I said. Where do you work? We're adventurers, Muthu said. We climb mountains every day, right, boss? Right, Arul said. Although some days we swim across rivers instead. What do I need to bring? I said. Don't worry, we'll find what you need, Arul said. Ruku will bring beads. You patted your bead bag. Good idea, he grinned at you. Good, you agreed. Kuti trotted along as we followed a rule across the bridge to the other side that we hadn't explored yet. It led to a crowded street where cars honked and bicycle bells trilled and motorbikes and auto rickshaws spewed trails of smoke. A van lurched by with school children in uniform hanging out the windows. One day, we'll go to school again, Ruku, I said, just like those kids. School? Muthu guffawed. I like I'd been joking. You actually like school? Not exactly, I admitted, thinking of the kids who teased us and the teachers who ignored us. Not all the time, but there was one teacher I loved, and she said, I paused thinking of all the wonderful things she'd said about my imagination and how smart I was and how she'd encouraged us both. I realized the biggest gift she'd given me wasn't the book, it was something else. She believed in me and Ruku. Believed what? Muthu said. She said, if we work hard, I tried adopting Paravethi teacher's persuasive tone. We can do anything when we grow up. I used to go to school when I lived in my village. Arul sounded wistful. I had a great teacher too. Don't sound so sad, boss, Muthu said. We can do anything we want now, even though we aren't going to school. In fact, we can do anything we feel like because we don't have any school teacher telling us what to do. We turned onto a street full of wooden stalls. At one stall, flies swarmed up from an open gutter onto the skinned carcass of goats. You held your nose. Think that's a bad smell? Muthu cackled. Wait till you get where we're going. I couldn't imagine what could be worse. I remembered reading an article about a man who cleaned sewers on an oily bit of newspaper in which Appa had wrapped pakoras to surprise us with on one of his good days. Surely we weren't going to clean sewers. Finally, we stopped in front of a shack that had a peeling sign hanging above the open door. Victory Waste Market. Kuti should wait outside, Arul said. Sit. You and Kuti and Muthu sat on the steps while I ducked into the shack after Arul. Towers of junk, paper, plastic, glass, and metal were stacked everywhere. The man was holding up a pair of rusty scales, weighing some cardboard. One sack, please, sir, Arul asked. The man's eyes fell on me. They were mean, like a rogue elephant's. What's your name, pretty girl? The man asked. I pretended I hadn't heard, figuring the less he knew about us, the better. Won't tell me your name? But you want my help? VG, I mumbled. New to the city? Where do you live? Not sure, I said. He motioned toward a pile of crumbled jute sacks lying in a corner. I took one, and Arul picked out a stick. Guys, jute is like, it would be made out of like a rope type of material, like not maybe ropes are plasticky now, but it would be made sort of like burlap sacks. I don't know if you all even know what that is, but that's what it is. It's made like out of a rope type of material is what jute is. Thank you, sir, Arul called over his shoulder. We stepped out of the cluttered shack into the dazzling sunshine. Arul shot me a concerned look. You probably want to wait outside with Ruku and Kuti from now on. Yes, I said, grateful he'd understood that the waste man scared me. We cut through an empty park and past some teetering apartment buildings that at least offered us shade from the blazing sun. Huge posters as tall as we were, advertising the latest movies, were plastered on the walls. We followed Arul to a flat, open field where there was no escape from the sunshine. Gee, you wrinkled your nose. Not far away was the largest garbage heap I'd ever seen. Mounds and mounds of junk and waste stretched out like a mountain range. The fragrance of wilted jasmine flowers mingled with the smell of goat droppings and every other bad smell imaginable. Welcome to the Himalayas of rubbish, Muthu said with a dramatic flourish. So mountains of garbage. Climbing the Himalayas. You marched a few feet away from us and away from the dump and stood with your hands on your hips. Kuti stayed by your side. Sorry, Ruku, I said. We have to stay. No, VG, you said in a reasonable tone. Go. We don't have a choice. Believe me. I don't love it here. You pinched your nostrils shut. It's not the nicest place, but it's so we can stay together, Ruku. You cocked your head. If I don't work here and earn money, we'll have to run right back to Appa. Understand? Appa hit VG, you said slowly. A paw hit a ma. My throat felt tight. You hadn't said anything about how he'd hit you. Viji and Ruku together. You came over and patted my cheek. Ruku will make necklaces, you announced. I hugged you tight. Where's Ruku going to sit? Muthu said. My eyes darted from one mound to the other, wondering what to do. But you solved the problem yourself. You found a plastic bucket to sit on under the shade of a thorny acacia tree, about as far from the rubbish range as you could go while staying within sight. You weren't as sheltered from the sun as I'd have liked, but there was nothing we could do about that. You opened your bag and pulled out a long piece of string and knotted the end with a bead, so the rest wouldn't fall off. You worked quietly with your fingers, sifting through the beads, searching for another that matched. I had to start working too. What do? I hitched up my skirt as high as I could. Search, Muthu prodded a broken bottle at the bottom base of the mountain. For treasure like this, glass or metal scraps are best. The waste smart man will even buy cardboard and cloth if they're not too tattered. Hesitantly, I prodded the mound closest to me. Nestling between a rusty can and a broken bottle was a carcass of a rat. Nausea rippled through me, but I couldn't give up before I started. I tried to pick up the bottle with my stick, but it slid deeper into the rubbish. The waste smart man pays nicely for glass and metal, so we can't let it go. Aru grabbed the bottle with his bare hands and dropped it into my sack. But this, he jabbed at the empty juice carton and sent it tumbling farther down into the rubbish, is worthless. Thanks. Sorry. Don't worry. You'll be an expert in no time. I didn't say I don't want to become an expert rag picker. I want to be a teacher. With an effort, I swallowed my words and the bile that had risen in my throat and stepped farther into the mound. Now, guys, remember we talked about this. The boys and girls didn't have gloves and they didn't have shoes and things like that necessarily when they did this. So you're picking up glass and sharp metal and, broken pieces of plastic and wood. So you would get injuries, you would get cuts, and there would be a lot of germs and bacteria and things like that. And also, she saw a dead rat, but there would also be obviously some live rats and rodents in there too. So you could stand a chance of getting bitten by those, among other things. So the bile that rose up in her throat, that's like when you get sick and you kind of have that little bit of acid kind of rise up in your throat. That's what she's talking about. The rubbish heap seemed to come alive as I walked through it, sucking at my slippers like a hungry beast. My feet sank into the slimy mess, and I lost sight of my shoes. Flies swarmed around my ankles. Shuffle along slowly like you're waddling through a river, a rule advised. He made it sound easy, but it wasn't. I squelched along as best I could, making slow progress. I speared a damp rag and shook it into my sack, but when I spotted a bottle half filled with sour milk, I had to reach for it with my bare hands. I wanted to run away screaming. The only thing that kept me going was how peaceful you looked when I glanced back at you sitting cross-legged, making another bead necklace with Kutu, alert and attentive next to you. Arul must have realized what a slog it was for me, because every now and then he called out, "Nice work." We worked for so long that with the sun beating down on our skin, that my head started to hammer with pain, and it was a mercy when Arul finally said, "Enough, let's stop." My spirit sank even deeper when I compared their loot with mine. I'm useless. I haven't got half as much as either of you. Don't worry, Arul peered into my sack. Lots of good stuff in there. We have more, but it's not worth as much, you'll see. Other than you, no one had ever shown me such loyalty. Even half empty, my sack was heavier than anything I'd carried before. But with you humming softly as you put away your beads, and our two new friends beaming at me like my sack was filled with precious gems, I shouldered my burden without complaint. My back straight, my step light. Chapter 15, Earning Our Way. On the way to the Waste Mart, we stopped by a park where there was a small pond. I cut my hands, gulped down some water, and then refilled our plastic bottle. Mama would never have let us drink water that wasn't boiled, but we didn't have a choice. So obviously her hands weren't clean, the water wasn't clean, but she still used her hands for the cup to make a cup to drink out of. I stretched my aching arms and rinsed off my slippers. They were unrecognizably dirty, and so was my skirt, even though I'd hiked it up when I worked. You and Cootie watched as the boys carefully separated our rubbish into piles: cardboard, metal, plastic, glass. Ruku wants to help, you told them. No, I said. You could cut your hand on a rusty tin. Ruku wants to help, you insisted. Ruku wants to help. If you don't mind, Arul said, why don't you let her help? You're joking, I said, though he sounded serious. Don't you ever let her do what she wants, he said. You stalked over to Arul. Fiji, you've got to stop bossing her. How dare you call me bossy? Arul softened his tone, but not his words. You're acting like you own Ruku. Muthu calls me boss, but I don't boss him around all the time. His words pierced me like needles. Fiji, I'm sorry. I see you're trying to protect your sister, but I bet she can do more than you think. Okay, I finally said. Let Ruku help, but if she slices her hand in half, you get to slice my hand in half. Arul grinned. I get to slice your hands into little tiny pieces. Agreed. So Arul showed you how to separate and sort the trash. As I watched you stack pieces of cardboard, and humming joyfully, the realization stabbed me that even I expected too little of you. When you were done, your eyes shone. Good work, you said to yourself. He clapped you on the back. That's right. You're the best helper. Best, you glanced at him, fierce with pride. Even though I liked seeing you feel happy and valued, my stomach gave a tiny lurch as you and Arul smiled at each other. Until now, it had been just the two of us. I jabbed the earth with my stick, ashamed to feel the twinge of jealousy. Arul deserved your affection, too. After all, he'd just seen something in you that I hadn't bothered to notice. What else had I, who'd known you and loved you so long, missed? That he'd discovered after knowing you less than a week. That's too much, I said, when Arul handed me half of what we'd earned that day. I only collected about a quarter of what you two did. If I was too ill to collect anything tomorrow, what would you do? Arul said. I'd share everything we had, I said. So whatever money we earn belongs to all of us, equal, right? Arul said. That's how it's been with me and Muthu, and that's how we like it. Right, boss, Muthu said. You want to stick with us? You play by our rules. I felt too trembly to say thanks. A good kind of trembling, not weak and fearful, like when we were at home. The rupee notes we'd earned were crumpled and dirty. One of them was torn off at the corner. Another had a brown smudge running across Mahatma Gandhi's face. But they looked beautiful to me. Disgusting though the work had been, we finally had money all our own. Our money, I rubbed the notes between my fingers as though they were fine silk. If we'd been rich, I'd have held them to them forever, just so I'd remember the feeling of freedom that they'd given me. We haggled with a handcart vendor for 2 bunches of bananas, one ready to eat, the other still green, so it would ripen in a day or two. Then we stopped by a shack where brightly colored sheets were packed tight in glass jars, and you chose your favorite color, green. What would you two like for dinner? Arul asked. Your first earnings, so you get to choose. Ruku's probably happy with just fruit and sweets, I said, but I'd like some biryani. As we approached a street vendor whose spicy food was making my mouth water, a passerby in a faded sari wrinkled her nose and pulled her sari across her face. With a shock, I realized that by climbing the Himalayas, I'd probably sunk lower than anyone's eyes than we'd been before. As much biryani as we can have, I said, handing over our cash to the vendor. My hand trembled. Did we look too scuffy to be served? Luckily, the vendor was kind and even tossed a dry roti to Kuti. But as I gratefully took the warm package of food from him, he did ask us to get going. Please don't hang around here. You'll drive away customers. You and the boys hurried back to the park with Kuti, but my feet dragged. Could we ever recover enough to clean ourselves up and go to school? Or was that dream as impossible as pretending the trash dump was a treasure trove? What are you waiting for, Akka? The food's going cold. Muthu said as he settled down on a bench to eat. Arul's done praying. I slowly rolled the spicy yellow mixture of rice and vegetables and meat into little balls with my fingers and licked the sauce off my hands. You happily sucked your sweet. Huti scarfed up a bit of food that fell through Muthu's fingers. Dusk was falling by the time we returned to our bridge, and I was glad. The darkness hid the dirt stains on my clothes from view.